Hello, welcome to the Citrus Garden. If you're new here, my name is Christina. If you're not new here, hi, welcome back. It's good to see you. This is a reading for Taurus suns, or if you have significant Taurus placements and are needing a masculine energy to work with or balance within yourself, then this reading is for you. So Taurus, your reading today, your energy feels just like, it feels like a fresh breath of air, but also like a bright sunny day coming together. It's really lovely. So I'm just gonna, that's just like the overall energy of the reading. And we're gonna go into the bottom of the deck, which is the overall context of your reading today. So we're starting off here at the Ace of Swords, which to me is talking about like untangling some sort of knot, right? With truth or with, I don't know, something. It's just like, it feels just like a breakthrough, right? Like a breakthrough, like the sun coming out, right? Like that kind of thing that unties or just like cuts out this knot. That there's like whatever that knot is, we'll get into it a little bit. And then we have like the Seven of Coins here, but it's specifically talking about, to me, like the gift of fire, right? There's a lot of change and transformation in your reading today. I was actually like the first card, there's so many synchronicities and so many messages coming in that this reading almost feels like, I feel like me as the reader is going to be kind of going all over the place. But anyways, the sun here is your first card in the actual reading part. But when this came out, I was actually like hearing the fire, which is so interesting. Because it's just talking about, like, I feel like this energy is really significant because, and I'll come back to this because I feel like I can't explain it in its entirety right now. So I'll come back to that card. And then you have here the Four of Cups and the Page of Wands. So the Four of Cups, which I really love because it's all of this energy of like having a lot of, it's actually talking about having a lot of wealth or abundance or like happiness and satisfaction where you are. But there's like this little bird in the background that's calling you. And I feel like you're being prompted to go in this direction. With the Page of Wands, I feel like you are responding is kind of how this is feeling with like sort of like leaving behind this sort of, perhaps not leaving behind, right? It doesn't necessarily feel like it has to be a permanent change, although maybe, but it's kind of just like exploring some other option that's calling you, that's pulling you forward, especially with these cards. So you have Saturn and music, which I love, but also with the numbers here, if you look at the numbers, it's 838. So whenever I see those numbers together, or like 383, that kind of thing, it talks to me about like abundance, like, and your work and alignment with that, right? So you are aligned in your work is kind of how this is feeling to me. And so I feel like, especially with Saturn coming out, you also have a lot of planets in this reading, this part of the reading today, but they're all like, you have Saturn, you have Uranus coming out twice, you also have Jupiter coming out. So they're more of the long-term, slower moving planets. But I feel like in the energy that you are now, especially because the Saturn just moved into Pisces, right? So maybe you're getting some sort of like gift of Saturn is kind of how this is feeling. And Uranus coming out twice is like this new inspiration, right? It's the gift of fire, right? If you think about like the Greek mythology, Prometheus giving the gift of fire, it allowed humans to expand and evolve and change, and like the discovery of fire was such a significant turning point. That's what your reading feels like today, a very significant turning point, especially with this card. So I pulled tons of cards, so I'm just going to talk about this one. This was at the bottom, the very first card, the Antimony card, which talks about almost like it's kind of like, because antimony is very corrosive, right? So it can burn through like all metals except for gold, which is really significant, which is so interesting because I feel like this call, right? There's there's been some sort of call for you to move in a certain direction or towards something. And it moves really quickly is kind of how this is feeling. Whatever this, because it could be related to creativity or your work, right? It's like you're being called towards something. And the interesting thing about this card is that the one line that stood out to me from the guidebook is the gray wolf responds to respect, not repression, right? And so there's something here about like, if you try and repress this call, it's going to end up being perhaps more destructive than if you were actually just respect and honor the call that you're being prompted to move towards, if that makes sense, which is really interesting. Okay, so that's the overall context of your reading. We're going to get into like the actual cards. So these two cards came out right away, the Sun and the Mystical Sister, which I absolutely adore together. So again, when this Sun card came out, I was hearing the fire, which is so interesting because it's coming out with this Silence card, right? So, there's so much here, and it all relates to this Seven of Coins. So it's kind of feeling like you have been called towards some sort of fire, which today is coming through as inspiration and perhaps creativity, right? Like some sort of, like you're being pulled towards something. And it's kind of like at this fire, right? Like a gathering at the fire, you're encountering this mystical sister. So I feel like if you haven't met them yet, you will be soon. But it kind of feels like you've already encountered this one, is kind of how this is feeling. Because meeting this one is causing a lot of changes in your life, is kind of how this is feeling, right? It's like you're both meeting at the fire. So with this card as well, okay, first of all, there's this one interesting synchronicity here where there's, if you can see this like tiny little shell by this one's ear, and with the Silence card, and also I had, like, in the last Pick a Card reading, which I did, if you haven't watched it, I'll link it at the end of this video. In group 3, there was this really interesting synchronicity about the fact that, like, sometimes something that's so loud, right? Something that's roaring, right? Extremely, like, a lot of noise actually feels like silence because it's so overpowering, right? So there's something there about this energy where there may be something here about, like, because the Mystical Sister, so it feels like another person or another energy outside of you who is perhaps coming in just as like a silent witness, is kind of how this is feeling. Where it's like, because it specifically talks about someone who doesn't try and fix the problem. There's no judgment. They just kind of sit there and listen and support you. It's a very supportive and friend-like energy, right? Like it's just like, it's just perhaps like, also this, with this energy, where, right, with the silence and the fire here, it's almost like you're so content to just sit in silence with this one, is kind of how this is feeling. There's no need for words, is kind of, which is a really lovely energy for me as an air sign, right? I love words. I love talking or like having interesting conversations, right? Which there is a time and place for that, absolutely. But with this one, it's like there's no words necessary, is kind of how this is feeling. Anyway, it's just beautiful. But anyway, so the next couple cards to come out. You have here the Resin card. I love this reading so much. It makes me so happy. The Resin card. So this talks about something that's stuck, right? Like stuck or preserved, I should say. Something that's preserved. So it could be some aspect of yourself, because it kind of feels like I was seeing this sort of resin as being whatever's stuck in the hand there, right? So there's something, because it was kind of looking like having a nail driven through the palm, which is just representing like a stuckness, right? You can't move because your hand is nailed down. There's also really something interesting about, like, I was getting sort of this feeling of like having bare shoulders for some reason. So having bare shoulders and then moving all the way down the arm, especially like the forearm and the hand, right? So it could be something to do with like your shoulders, perhaps representing some aspect of like carrying a burden, right? But the fact that they are now bare, which is interesting, it could be something like there's no longer a burden, that kind of thing. Maybe. But anyways, with this resin card and this like the mystical sister, right? Because I'm not seeing the other person as this moth. I'm seeing you as being this sort of triangle. They're the other triangle. Both of you are gathering at the fire. And what this fire is doing is that it's melting away this resin, which is so interesting, right? It's melting away this resin. And then what's on the inside of this resin is this moth. And so with the sun card coming out, it's kind of like, whatever this call is for you, right, that you're being pulled towards, it's a gathering at the fire where all of this sort of stuckness is being melted away. And what it is, it's a full expression. It's a vitality. It's a life force that's being freed, is kind of how this is feeling. Anyways, okay, and then the next card to come out is the Quicksilver, which I love. So this is bringing in this energy of Mercury, so the planet Mercury, but also the element or the metal Mercury. So I love this deck because it just brings out this like very nerdy chemistry teacher aspect of me. So if you don't know this about Mercury, it's the only metallic element, right, on the periodic table. It's the only metal that is liquid at room temperature. So it's kind of like what this is telling me, especially with the resin, right? Because resin is something that is always solid, or it, as we see it, right, like a fossil. It's preserved. It's non-moving. But what's happening here is that this fire is having a very permanent kind of change or transformation where it's like even when this fire sort of goes away or whatever leaves, your state, right, remains fluid even at room temperature, even when there isn't sort of the heat source, right? So it remains fluid. It's bringing in all of this like fluidity and movement, which is so lovely and gorgeous, because I feel like that's something that you've been needing, Taurus, right? It's kind of like it's perhaps prompting you into action again, though not necessarily. It just kind of feels like perhaps there's been a situation, is kind of how this is feeling, that had stuckness associated with it. And it's like that situation was preventing you from moving, right? Like or preventing you from acting. But it's like this gathering is allowing you to move forward, it kind of feels like. And finally you have this red and white rose, which I love so much because this is also bringing in the energy of Mercury as well, with sort of the snake coil, right? The symbol of medicine and healing is kind of what's coming through. And also I wore this, I always get dressed before I pull the cards, and I just love when there's synchronicities between like what shirt I choose to put on and like significant cards. Anyways, so the red and white rose. So this card, whenever it comes out, always brings in like the energy of like, imagine if you're doing a load of white laundry and a red item gets thrown into the laundry, right? It ends up turning the entire load pink. But the miracle of this card is that all the colors remain separate, right? There's no sort of unwanted blending. So it's like I feel like this is talking about there's something really practical coming into your life that has like a spiritual nature to it. That's what these two cards were bringing in. It's kind of a non-intuitive message, actually. It's kind of like, I feel like there's something physical coming into your life that has a very spiritual cause or like origin of some sort. I don't know what that means exactly, but it's kind of, I feel like there's something here about like fluidity, but also I feel like this is also talking about this mystical sister, where it's kind of like the two of you and this other person, it feels like, or other energy, are coming together in a very almost miraculous way, but still maintaining your own individual identities, because there's something very different about the two of you, right? You're very different, right? Almost opposites, but the coming together of this feels like medicine of some sort, or a miracle, or something very practical or solid that has a very spiritual origin. I'm just going to leave it there because I have no idea what that means. But anyways, so we have, okay, I'm just going to keep going. We have a lot of tarot cards. I'm using this really interesting deck today. So we're starting off here with the 9 of Cups and the 5 of Swords, which is kind of telling me this story of like the situation that you're finding yourself in, or that you're in right now, that you've been dealing with for a while. The 9 of Cups, which is really interesting because it kind of feels like, I was also getting this kind of energy of being hungover. So perhaps not literally, most likely not literally, but this is the thing that perhaps appear like the fun night out is kind of how this is feeling with the 9 of Cups, right? Like something that perhaps you thought was a really good idea, or in the moment it felt really positive and happy and freeing and whatever it is, right? Something that felt very fulfilling emotionally, but then it's like the next day there's a hangover, right? A really just terrible hangover is kind of how this is feeling, right? With the 5 of Swords, some sort of defeat, right? Perhaps there was something deceptive about this energy, because that's what was coming through with this card. Something deceptive about this energy that led to a hangover the next day. Or if it's not that, I was also kind of getting that it was something like some aspect of the past. I don't know how past this is. It could be even like a very past event, that somehow the effects of that event or heartbreak it's actually coming through with, some sort of heartbreak that happened in the past, was carried over into your current manifestation, perhaps without you knowing, right? That's where the deceptive energy is coming through, where it's like that past heartbreak was carried over, right? It was brought into the new manifestation without your knowing, is kind of how this is feeling. And but what's happening now, it's like this gathering at the fire with the mystical sister is bringing in this energy, the Justice and the Strength card, which I really love, because it kind of, which again, this is the strength, like something to do with your shoulders. I feel like the stuckness, even just being in proximity to this one, or being in their space or their energy, is helping to melt away some sort of burden. I don't know how. It kind of just feels, and I feel like it's not even like they are purposely doing anything about it, right? It's not like they're helping you to fix the problem. They're not providing any sort of solution for you. It's just almost like when you're in proximity to each other, something just happens. I don't know what. There's whatever that fire energy is, right? It's coming from like spirit is what I want to say, right? Like something from the universe. It's not anything to do with them, because I feel like as well on their end, they are also experiencing this aspect as well, as what this is feeling like. It's not just for you, it's also for them. They're also experiencing some sort of melting of the stuckness, right? On their side, but it's not like you did anything to help clear that, if that makes sense, right? It's just something that's happening because the both of you happen to be in the same area. I have no idea how that works though. I'm just gonna leave it there. However, there is this energy here. This next couple of cards are actually quite difficult, but because it's coming out with memories, right? It's coming out with memories and also intuition. Memories and intuition, which I really love, because I feel like on some level this sort of melting away, right? The melting away of the resin is stirring up memories, right? In order for them to be released, because I feel like what the memories are this, the Tower, the 10 of Wands, the 10 of Wands, which is all of that burden. That's interesting. I thought this was the 10 of Swords when it first came out. But it's the 10 of Wands. And then to clarify that, I got the 3 of Swords. And this 3 of Swords talks about repression or oppression, right? Like there's some sort of energy here that because of the oppression of it caused you perhaps to clip your wings. That's how this card was coming through today. And that's sort of the carrying over, right? This is the heartbreak energy that has been carried over, that is needing to be cleared now, is kind of how this is feeling, right? This is, and I feel like you may be experiencing this or just like remembering it. There's some sort of like memory recall maybe that's happening for you in this, which is so interesting. But I feel like you may also be experiencing like, I don't know, there's something really interesting here happening with these cards as well. Hold on. I have to talk about this first. So you have the silence, the intuition, the memories, and then the last card here to come out was the coins, which is really interesting. But if you just look at the colors, right? Sacral chakra and throat chakra. And both of those two things need to be aligned in order for there to be like a proper expression of creativity, which is really important, right? There's something here, a lot of creativity energy in your reading today, especially with the fire. So I feel like there's some sort of like unlocking of some aspect of your creativity that is, so it could be something like there was some sort of oppressive energy in your past that caused you to clip your own wings or to repress some aspect of your creativity, perhaps. And that energy of like self, with the shoulders, right? It's like you're the self, perhaps repression, right? Self-repression has been carried over into your current manifestation, and that's why there's been a stuckness. Maybe. I don't know. Okay, but anyways, this coins card is really interesting because this is the first time this card has come out. And there was so much here. Because coins are an element of currency, right? An exchange of resources. So it could be something like what you and this mystical sister are experiencing at the fire is actually some sort of exchange of resources, is kind of how this is feeling, right? There's a currency exchange. I don't know in what form, right? Most likely, maybe it is monetary, right? There may be some sort of like business collaboration, maybe for one of you, because again, the message that was coming through with the rose, right? The red and white rose is that that's something practical. I don't know why it's almost like the words just like disappeared. There's something practical coming in for you that has a very spiritual origin. Isn't that true of most things though? Is kind of what I'm feeling like. I'm not sure. I feel like there's something there that needs to be explored a little bit more. But anyways, I feel like there's something about, okay, that's what was coming through the coins. Okay. With this aspect, there's something here as well. This reading's getting long, so I'm gonna close it with this message. But there's something here about the coins. So if you're Canadian, or if you know about this about Canada, is that we don't use pennies anymore, right? We've eliminated the pennies as a form of currency. And so with this resin here, there's something here that about perhaps there has been something lost, right? Some sort of memory that's been lost, or something that perhaps you, Taurus, have been wanting to preserve, is kind of how this is feeling. There's something that perhaps you're wanting to preserve about the past, because this resonance card doesn't always have to be a negative thing, right? It could, because it's coming out with memories, there's perhaps something that you cherish, or something that you're wanting to preserve, but perhaps the rest of the culture or whatever it is has forgotten it, right? It's like it's no longer in use. Or it's no longer like something and it's almost like, because it's so rare, right? Because it's like, perhaps it's something to do with this mystical sister. You and this other person both have some sort of shared memory or shared value, perhaps, right? There's something that you both value that perhaps other people don't value, or other people don't remember, or something like that. It's so interesting. And that's why when the two of you come together, it's like, because this moth aspect, or this little penny, right? This little penny between the two of you is shared, that it melts away all of the stuckness. It's like, oh, there's someone who remembers this thing that everyone else has forgotten, is kind of how this is feeling, which just feels so... because it's like they see you, right? They absolutely see you. And I feel like you also see them. And so that's kind of what is happening for the two of you. It's like there's something remembered between the two of you, and because of that, it's like you can exchange your currency with the other, because it's kind of like everyone else thinks that this is worthless. Oh my god. Okay, everyone else thinks that this like little aspect of, I don't know what this is, perhaps aspect of self, right? Something that gives you life that everyone else thinks is worthless, or forgotten, perhaps. Maybe not worthless, but it's just forgotten, or it's not valued as much anymore, or whatever it is. But it's like, because the two of you share that in common, you can exchange pennies. That's what this is feeling. Okay, I'm gonna leave it there. And now it's bringing in all of this like pennies for thought, that kind of thing. Anyways, okay, I'm gonna leave it there. I'm gonna move to the extended. We're gonna talk about what else you may need to know about this situation. If you're interested in that, the link is in the description box below. I've also opened up my website if you're interested in a personal reading. You can also find information on that in the description box. All the decks that I'm using are also listed below. Thank you so much for sharing your energy with me. If this message resonated with you, please consider subscribing, liking, or leaving a comment. And I hope you have a great day. Bye.